3 things about Terra Nullius you've never been told. Everyone thinks the legal concept of Terra Nullius simply meant an empty land, ripe for the taking. They're wrong. In the burgeoning colony of New South Wales during the 1830s, it became a perilous promise, a legal fiction weaponized by the unscrupulous, transforming vast, unknown territories into highly speculative, often fraudulent investments. This wasn't merely about distant legal theory, it was about cold, hard cash. Fortunes were made, and more often lost, in a dizzying cascade of land schemes built upon a foundation of sand. At the heart of one such audacious deception was a figure named Robert Fitzwilliam, a man whose name became synonymous with grand promises and ultimate betrayal. Fitzwilliam arrived in Sydney in 1835, not as a wealthy landowner, but as a man of considerable ambition and even greater persuasive charm. He saw the avarice among the colonial elite, the hunger for land, and the British government's often vague policies as fertile ground for a scheme of monumental proportions. The colonial administration, under Governor Richard Burke, was already grappling with rapid expansion and a ravenous demand for pasture. Land grants were complex, often arbitrary, and ripe for exploitation. Fitzwilliam understood this intricate dance of bureaucracy and desire perfectly. His grand plan, as it unfurled, was deceptively simple: to sell land he didn't own. He claimed to possess immense tracts of fertile land in the interior of New South Wales, lands that, in reality, were either already occupied by indigenous communities or were entirely outside any recognized colonial jurisdiction. Fitzwilliam's pitch was sophisticated. He didn't just sell plots, he sold a vision of instant wealth, sprawling estates, and a new life for eager British immigrants and ambitious colonial settlers. He even produced elaborate, hand-drawn maps, complete with fictitious rivers and thriving settlements. These maps, though beautiful, were pure fiction. They were designed to convince, to inspire, and most importantly, to obscure the inconvenient truth. The land parcels he was selling existed only on paper, in the eager imaginations of his victims. He promised titles, surveys, and even future infrastructure. Investors, many of them new arrivals to the colony, or those with little understanding of the vast, untamed interior, bought into the dream. They paid significant sums, often their entire life savings, for what they believed were secure investments in the future of Australia. The scheme gained traction rapidly, fueled by the era's land speculation fever. People spoke of Fitzwilliam's enterprises in Sydney's taverns and parlours. The illusion of legitimacy was carefully maintained by Fitzwilliam, who cultivated relationships with prominent, albeit unwitting, figures. But the cracks began to appear. Purchasers, eager to claim their new estates, would venture inland, only to discover their promised lands were either impassable wilderness, already settled by others, or simply did not match the descriptions on Fitzwilliam's fabricated deeds. One such unfortunate investor, a recently arrived merchant, found his sprawling sheep station to be nothing more than a swamp. Another, promised rich agricultural land, discovered an arid, rocky outcrop hundreds of miles from any water source. The truth was slowly, painfully emerging. Complaints flooded the governor's office. Letters to the editor appeared in the Sydney Gazette, initially cautious, then increasingly accusatory. The sheer volume of discrepancies made it impossible for the authorities to ignore. Fitzwilliam's carefully constructed facade was crumbling. The legal implications of Fitzwilliam's fraud were immense. It wasn't just about money. It struck at the very heart of the colonial government's authority and the perceived stability of land tenure. If land could be so easily sold by a charlatan, what was the value of any deed? The scandal culminated in a public outcry and official investigations. Fitzwilliam, cornered, attempted to flee, but was apprehended. His trial, though brief, captivated the colony. The details of his meticulously crafted lies were laid bare for all to see. He was ultimately convicted of fraud, though the full extent of his ill-gotten gains was never entirely recovered. Many victims were ruined, their dreams of a new life in Australia shattered. The Fitzwilliam fraud served as a stark, painful lesson in colonial land speculation. It highlighted the inherent dangers of terra nullius, a concept that, by declaring land empty, ironically created a vacuum that charlatans like Fitzwilliam could fill with false promises. It exposed the vulnerability of an eager, often naive, populace against sophisticated deception. The legacy of the Fitzwilliam fraud reverberated for years, prompting reforms in land registration and a greater scrutiny of colonial land claims. It underscored the critical need for verifiable documentation and transparency in an era defined by rapid expansion and boundless ambition. This story isn't just a historical footnote. It's a timeless reminder that when the promise of easy wealth meets a lack of oversight, the consequences can be devastating. The human desire for a better life, for land, for security, remains a powerful leverage point for those who would exploit it. The perilous promise of terra nullius, in the hands of a fraudster like Fitzwilliam, transformed a legal concept into a weapon, destroying lives and livelihoods, leaving behind a cautionary tale etched into the very foundations of a nation. Next, we unravel the intricate web of deception behind the infamous Piltdown Man hoax.